The guest book already had my name in it when I arrived. Not a similar name. Not a coincidence. My full name. Daniel James Merritt, in handwriting I didn't recognize. On the last filled page of a leather guest book sitting on the kitchen counter of a cabin I had rented for the weekend. Signed and dated. The date was tomorrow. I want to tell you what was written under my name. What the entry described. What it got right and what, as of the moment I am recording this, has not happened yet. But first I need to tell you about the 11 entries that came before mine. Because once I understood what they were, once I understood what every single previous guest had done after finding their own entry, the entry with my name on it stopped being the most disturbing thing in that guest book. What every previous guest did after reading their entry is the most disturbing thing in that guest book. And I am doing it right now. I booked the cabin 3 weeks in advance. A weekend alone in the Smoky Mountains. No deadlines, no notifications, no people. I am a writer by profession and I had a project that was not finishing itself in the city. And I needed the specific silence of a place that required effort to reach. The listing was normal. 4.8 stars. 62 reviews. Charming photos, knotty pine walls, a stone fireplace, a porch facing the tree line. Previous guests described it as peaceful. Secluded. Exactly what they needed. One reviewer said, "The best decision I made all year was booking this cabin." I thought about that review later. I thought about it a lot. The drive-in took 40 minutes from the nearest town on a road that narrowed progressively until it was barely wider than my car. My phone lost signal at the 12-mile mark and did not recover it for the entire weekend. I knew this from the listing. The host had mentioned it as a feature, not a flaw. Unplugged completely. I had thought that sounded appealing. The cabin itself was exactly as advertised. Clean. Warm. The fireplace worked. The kitchen was stocked with the basics the host had promised. The porch looked out at trees and the particular gray-green silence of a November forest in Tennessee at 4 in the afternoon. I put my bag down. I made coffee. I stood on the porch for 10 minutes watching the tree line. Then I came inside and saw the guest book on the kitchen counter. Leather-bound. Dark green. A small brass clasp on the front. Thicker than you would expect. The kind of book that looks like it has been collecting entries for decades. Not the 2 years the listing said the property had been available. I picked it up because that is what you do with a guest book. You flip through it. You read what previous guests wrote. It is one of the small pleasures of staying somewhere unfamiliar. The sense that you are part of a chain of people who chose the same place for their own reasons. I opened to the first entry. I read all 11 entries before I reached mine. I wish I had stopped after the third. The first entry was dated 14 months ago. A couple, Sarah and Tom, from Nashville. Anniversary weekend. They wrote half a page in warm looping handwriting about the fireplace and the hiking trail behind the cabin, and how they needed this more than they knew. Normal. Lovely. The kind of thing you expect to find. The third entry. A woman named Claire. Solo trip. 7 months ago. Mentioned that she had heard something moving outside the cabin on her second night. Something large. She wrote. Moving in the trees at around 3 a.m. She had assumed it was a deer. She wrote. I told myself it was a deer. And I believe that was the right decision. That sentence stayed with me. The way she phrased it. I believe that was the right decision. As though she was still convincing herself. The fifth entry was a man named Robert. Visiting alone. He wrote 3 paragraphs in neat, careful handwriting. about the quality of the silence. Not peaceful silence, he wrote, but the kind of silence that feels like it is waiting for something. He mentioned that the guest book itself felt strange to him, that he had the persistent feeling, reading through previous entries, that the previous guests had not fully left, that something of each of them remained in the cabin. He wrote, "I don't mean this in a supernatural way. I mean it in the way that places hold the atmosphere of the people who have been in them." He ended his entry warmly. 5 stars. Would return. But I noticed his handwriting had changed between the first paragraph and the last. Tighter. Smaller. The handwriting of someone writing faster than they meant to. The 7th entry was for sentences. The 8th was 3. The 9th entry was a woman named Patricia, dated 6 weeks ago. 1 paragraph. She wrote, "I found something in this guest book that I am not going to describe here, because writing it down makes it more real. I am leaving tomorrow morning instead of Sunday. If you are reading this before you look at the last pages, close the book, put it back on the counter, leave." She did not leave. I know she did not leave, because the 10th and 11th entries exist. Patricia wrote the 10th entry. For words. Just for words. In handwriting so different from her first paragraph, that I would not have known it was her. It was already right. The 11th entry was from a man named Greg, dated 3 weeks ago. 2 sentences. Don't read yours. You won't be able to stop yourself. But don't. Then my entry. Daniel James Merritt. Tomorrow's date. My handwriting. And below my name. 3 paragraphs describing a weekend. That was just beginning. My entry. Daniel James Merritt. Arrival, Friday, November 8th. Departure, Sunday, November 10th. The first paragraph described my drive-in. The 12-mile mark where my phone lost signal. The way the road narrowed. The grey-green of the trees at 4 in the afternoon. The coffee I made when I arrived. The 10 minutes on the porch. I had done all of those things before I opened the guest book. The second paragraph described my first evening. The fire I would light at 6 p.m. The dinner I would make. Pasta. Because I had brought pasta. And nothing else requiring real effort. The chapter 1 would write between 8 and 10 p.m. Sitting at the kitchen table, with the laptop open, and the fire burning down behind me. The specific paragraph I would get stuck on. Not the scene, not the dialogue, but the transition between 2 sections I had been struggling with for 3 weeks. I lit the fire at 6 p.m. I made pasta. I sat at the kitchen table between 8 and 10 p.m. I got stuck on the transition. The third paragraph described the night. At 2:58 a.m. I would hear something on the back porch. Not movement in the trees. On the porch itself. Footsteps. The specific sound of weight on the wooden boards. Moving from the left side of the porch to the right. Slow. Deliberate. Stopping directly outside the back door. At 3:04 a.m. I would open the back door. The entry did not describe what I would see when I opened it. That is where the third paragraph ended. Below the third paragraph, below the blank space where the description of what I would see should have been, was a 4th paragraph. Short. For sentences. written in the same handwriting as everything else. My handwriting. It said, "I understand now. I read the other entries. And I thought I would be different. I thought knowing would change something. The only thing knowing changes is that you understand what you are writing when you write it." I read that fourth paragraph at 7 p.m. on Friday evening. It was written in my handwriting. I had not written it. It was 7:14 p.m. when I finished reading the entry. I had approximately 8 hours before 3:04 a.m. I closed the guestbook. I put it back on the counter. I went back to my laptop. I did not leave. I spent the 8 hours trying to find the explanation. Not because I was calm. I was not calm. But because I am a writer. And writers, when confronted with something that doesn't make sense, do what they always do. They research. They look for the seam, where the impossible thing connects to something explicable. I pulled up the Airbnb listing on my downloaded cache. I had screenshotted it before losing signal. Habit from years of remote trips. The host account. No profile photo. No bio. No other listings. The account had been created the same week the cabin listing went live. 2 years ago. I had not noticed this before booking. Nobody notices this before booking. I photographed every page of the guestbook. All 62 pages. I went through the handwriting. Every entry was written by a different person. Different pressure. Different letter forms. Different ink colors. These were not faked. I know handwriting. I work with documents. These were 11 different people who had sat in this cabin and written in this book. I examined the book itself. The leather cover. The binding. Paper quality. Nothing about this book was 2 years old. The leather was dry and cracked, in the way that leather gets after decades of handling. The paper had the specific yellowing of age. Not uniform, which would suggest artificial aging, but uneven. The way paper actually ages. When it sits in a place with variable humidity across many years. This book was old. Significantly older than the listing. I went back through the 62 reviews on the listing. 62 reviews across 2 years. I had read several before booking. I went through all of them now, looking for anything unusual. The reviews were uniformly positive. 5 stars. Peaceful. Exactly what I needed. Perfect for a writing retreat. One of the best decisions I made all year. 62 reviews. 11 guestbook entries. 51 guests who stayed here and left no entry in the guestbook, or whose entries I could not find. At 11 p.m., I heard something in the trees to the north of the cabin. Not on the porch. In the trees. At the edge of the property. Maybe 30 feet from the back wall. Something moving through the undergrowth. Slow. Not an animal's movement. Animals move in bursts. Stopping and starting. This was continuous. Steady. The movement of something that knew exactly where it was going and was not in any hurry. It moved from the north to the east over approximately 4 minutes. Then it stopped. I sat in the kitchen with every light on until 2:30 a.m. At 2:58 a.m. I heard footsteps on the back porch. Exactly as the entry described. At 2:58 a.m., the footsteps started on the back porch. Exactly as the entry described. Left side to right side. Weight on the boards. Heavy. Deliberate. Completely unlike an animal. Stopping directly outside the back door. Then, silence. I sat at the kitchen table for 6 minutes. At 3:04 a.m., I opened the back door. I want to be precise about what I experienced standing in that doorway. Not what I saw. I am going to come back to that. But what I experienced. Because the experience is more important than any description I could give you of what was physically there. What I experienced was the specific feeling of something that had been waiting for a very long time, recognizing that the thing it had been waiting for had arrived. Not hunger, not threat, not malice. Recognition. The feeling of a process completing itself, of something that had been running. Some cycle, some mechanism, some arrangement older than the cabin, and older than the listing, and older than the guest book, and older perhaps than anything I have a word for. Reaching the moment it had been building toward. I stood in the doorway for 4 minutes. Then I closed the door. I went to the kitchen table. I opened the guest book. To my entry. I read the 4th paragraph again. I understand now. I read the other entries. And I thought I would be different. I thought knowing would change something. I picked up the pen that was sitting next to the guest book. The same pen that had been sitting there since I arrived. I had assumed the host left it for signing the guest book. I understand now why it was there. I did not write anything. I put the pen down. I went to bed. In the morning, I packed my bag. I made coffee. I stood on the porch and looked at the tree line. For 10 minutes, I drove back down the narrowing road. My phone found signal at the 12-mile mark. The first thing I did with signal was open my voice recorder. And I started recording this. I have been trying to understand what the guest book is since I left the cabin on Sunday morning. Not what put it there, not who made it, or who maintains it, or who owns the cabin, and why they continue to list it. Those questions may have answers that I am not equipped to find. What I have been trying to understand is the mechanism, what it does, and why. Here is what I think. I think the guest book does not predict. I think the word prediction implies uncertainty, that something might happen, or might not. And the guest book knows which. I don't think that's what's happening at that cabin. I think what happens at that cabin has already happened, not in a future that the guest book can see, in a present that exists outside of the time I experience. Whatever is at that cabin exists in a different relationship to time than I do. It has already seen me arrive, already seen me read the guest book, already seen me open the back door at 3:04 a.m., already seen me stand in that doorway for 4 minutes and feel what I felt. The guest book doesn't predict my weekend. It transcribes it from a perspective that has already watched it happen. Which means the entry was accurate. Because the entry was always accurate. My name was in the guest book before I arrived, because from the guest book's perspective, I had already been there. The weekend had already happened. It was already part of the record. And what every previous guest did, what Patricia did, what Greg did, what all 11 of them did, after reading their entries and living them, was add their voice to the record. Some in writing, some, like me, in other ways. This recording is my guest book entry. There is one thing I haven't told you. When I drove back down the road on Sunday morning, when my phone found signal at the 12-mile mark, and I opened my voice recorder to start recording this, I also checked the Airbnb app. The listing was still live. Guest 13 had already booked arrival next Friday. I found their name in the listing confirmation. I will not say it here, but I want you to understand something. Their name is already in the guest book. It has always been in the guest book. They just don't know it yet. And neither did I. And neither did any of the 11 people who came before me and read their entries and lived them and added their voices to the record of something that has been running at that cabin in the Smoky Mountains for longer than anyone who has ever stayed there has been alive. I reported the listing to Airbnb on Monday morning. The listing is still active. Guest 13 checks in on Friday. I reported the listing Monday morning. It is still active. Guest 13 checks in on Friday. I have one question for the comments. Patricia warned the next guest. She wrote, "Close the book, put it back on the counter, leave." She did not leave. She wrote 2 more entries after her warning. She became part of the record anyway. I am recording this. I am adding my voice to the record anyway. If you had found your name in that guest book, if you had read your own weekend described in your own handwriting before it happened, would you have left? Leave me your answer. I am reading every one. Subscribe for new story. And if you ever rent a remote cabin, check the guest book before you unpack.